Hello, my name is Dr. Kurt Sander, and welcome back to Music Theory Simplified. Today's lesson is all about that thing we call a key signature. Now, a key signature is simply an indicator at the beginning of each staff that might describe the key of a piece of music that you're playing. But as far as history is concerned, the key signature is a relatively recent phenomenon. In fact, if you go back to the time of Bach, back in the early 1700s, you would find that the use of a key signature was not completely standardized. A lot of this had to do with the kind of tuning systems that musicians used for keyboard instruments at that time. These tuning systems were tuned specifically to an acoustic central key, which made that key sound very good. But if you wanted to move into a different key, it may have sounded completely out of tune. So the answer to that was to create a system of tuning where every note is equally spaced. Now, this allowed the composer to write in many different keys within a single movement, and they would all sound equally good, or as a purist might say, equally out of tune. So once this concept of equal temperament started taking off, the use of the key signature became more standardized, because composers could write in a variety of different keys and show that using this key signature. There are two functions of key signatures. The first is to make it easier to read the score. Here's a famous nocturne in D-flat by Chopin. You can see that if we don't have a key signature, there are a lot of flats that clutter up the score and make it visually unappealing. But if we put the key signature of D-flat major in, we eliminate the need for all of those flats. The second reason to use a key signature is to help orient the performer to what the key of the piece might be. In looking at the key signature, we can deduce that this is in G major, and this score in F major. But how can we determine the key based on the key signature? Moreover, how do we know if it's in major or minor? There are two parts to key signature literacy. The first is identifying the key signature based on what it looks like, and the second is producing it based on the key you want to write in. At some point, you may have seen this clock-like diagram that represents all major and minor key signatures. This is known in music as a circle of fifths diagram. At the very top 12 o'clock position, we find the key of C major or A minor, no sharps or flats. Moving counterclockwise by descending fifths, we can see that we get the flat keys. Moving clockwise by ascending fifths, we get the sharp keys. When looking at a key signature that contains flats, we follow the rule that the second to last flat is always the name of the key. The second to last flat here is A flat, so that's the name of our major key. Let's look at one more. The second to last flat here is C flat, so again, that's the name of our major key. There's only one key where this doesn't work. For example, there's no second to last flat here. For this one case, you're just going to have to memorize that one flat is the key signature of F major. The process of identifying major sharp keys is even easier. You simply go up a half step or a minor second from the last sharp. Up a minor second from F sharp is G, so the key is G major. Here's another sharp key. Remember, we go up a minor second from the last sharp. Up a minor second from C sharp is D, so the key is D major. Every major key shares a relationship with two other minor keys. In music theory, we refer to a relationship to a parallel key and also to a relative key. A parallel relationship is simply when two keys share the same starting note or home note, but don't share the same key signature. G major and G minor both use G as the starting note, but have different key signatures. A more important relationship, however, is the relative relationship. Relative keys do not share the same starting note, but they do share the same key signature. Knowing how to find the relative relationship is essential for being able to identify minor keys from their key signatures. Here's the key of G major. Now, to find the relative minor of any given major key, you simply go down a minor third, which is 3 half steps, or 3 piano keys. By doing this, you get the note E, so the relative minor of G major is E minor. Let's try it with a flat key. Here we have the key signature of D flat major. Remember, the second to last flat is the name of the major key. To find the relative minor, we go down a minor third, or 3 piano keys. So let's bring back our piano keyboard and find D flat, and then move down a minor third. But this brings up an interesting question. This note right here, do we call it a B flat or an A sharp? Remember that the instruction said to go down a minor third. It can't be an A sharp because that would make a fourth. So a B flat to a D flat is a minor third. So we can say that the relative minor of D flat major is B flat minor. Students often ask, how do you know whether a piece is in major or minor if we know that the relative keys share the same key signature? The answer has a lot to do with context. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we couldn't see the title of this piece. We could only see the key signature. By looking at the opening chord and the notes in the score and the harmonic relationships, we can make a reasonable conclusion that it's in a major key. But how do we know for sure? Here's a score in minor. Let's say we couldn't see the title. We could only see the key signature. Well, in minor, we are going to be looking for that raised leading tone. So if we're in the key of D minor, we're looking for C sharps. And you can see that these C sharps are all over. Plus, the fact that we begin on a D minor chord gives us a reasonable certainty that this is in D minor. Okay, so we see that identifying key signatures is a pretty straightforward kind of thing. But what if I asked you to write out a key signature? For example, if someone asked you to write a progression in C sharp major, how would you know what key signature to use if you weren't looking at it? Well, I've got an answer for that as well. The secret is to know the ordering of sharps and flats within a key signature. Because if you know the order, you can reproduce that key signature until you visually see the key that you're looking for. Now I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a moment because I'm going to tell you a story. And when I'm done with this story, I think you'll see that there's a reason for it. And the reason is that this story is going to help you remember the order of flats and sharps. Our story begins with a young man named Charles. And Charles grew up in a time when great battles were fought over land and many people died. Now Charles was raised only by his father, whom he loved very much. And his father taught him great virtues like peace and love. Now Charles lived in a village that was full of greedy people. And it came to pass that one spring, these people decided that they wanted to go to war with the neighboring village over a plot of land so that they could grow more vegetables and become more wealthy. So the summer came, and the village went to war with this neighboring village. And as it turns out, they were horribly defeated, and they came back, and poor Charles's father was so distressed that he fell over in an emotional turmoil and spent the remaining days in bed. Now, from that point on, Charles was committed to peace, and he even ended up becoming a priest in a local monastery. Now, the years went by, and a great famine came across the land. And once again, this village that was so greedy decided to go to war once again over this plot of land owned by the neighboring village. So at this point, Father Charles intervened, and he got both villages together and spoke to them. And he was so eloquent and loving with his words that they decided to split the land and share the crops equally. And from that point forward, everyone had enough to eat. And as all stories end, they lived happily ever after. Now, I didn't take all of this time just to tell you a story. By remembering a phrase associated with this story, you will never forget the order of flats and sharps again. Let me show you what I mean. Here's the phrase that I want you to remember, the first of two. Remember the first part of the story, when the village lost the battle and Charles's father had an emotional breakdown. The phrase I want you to remember is battle ends and down goes Charles's father. Now, if you remember this phrase, you remember the order of flats in a key signature. Let's take a quick look. Battle ends and down goes Charles's father. Let's put this to use. What if we were looking for the key signature of E flat major? Well, remember, the key is the second to last flat in the key signature. So we simply add flats until the point at which the E is the second to last flat. So by following this process, we can see that the key signature for E flat major has 3 flats. And now that you know that phrase, let's reverse the order of the words. And by doing that, you get the next phrase, which tells you the order of sharps. The second part of our story was when the villagers wanted to go to battle again, and the grown-up Charles, now Father Charles, had to intervene. The phrase I want you to remember here is Father Charles goes down and ends battle. So we can see that this directly corresponds to the order of sharps. And it's especially convenient in that it's the same phrase recited backwards. So if we were wanting to find out what the key signature is of, say, E major, we would have to remember that the key is 1 half step higher than the last sharp. So we would simply go through the order of sharps until we came across the letter that is a half step lower than the key that we're trying to find. Father, which is the key of G. Charles, which is the key of D. Goes, which is the key of A. Down, which is the key of E. So by following this process, we can see that the key of E major has 4 sharps. By repeating this process, eventually you find that you've memorized the key signatures just by how they look. I hope this video gives you a clear understanding of the use of key signatures and how we can identify them and how we can produce them in the music that we write. Over time, your ability to identify key signatures will become second nature, and you won't have to go through the mental process of this kind of calculation. But because the knowledge of key signatures impacts everything we do in theory, it's essential for you to know this, and this is a great place to start. So, for Music Theory Simplified, this is Dr. Kurt Sander once again reminding you to keep it simple.